we'll start a little bit early. What the heck? I'm Larry O'Hanlon, and I'm not what these people are. They are scientists who blog. I'm a science writer, so I'm going to be learning a lot from this as well. One of my hats is I manage the blogosphere for AGU, and I've invited a selection of scientist bloggers, and the focus of this this forum is, I hope, first let me ask, how many people here are practicing scientists? Good, good, because I didn't want a bunch of science writers in here. You don't need them. Because the goal here is to give you, so hopefully you came because you're interested in learning about blogging and you've considered it as something that you might do in addition to your other duties. And that's what everyone here does, and they are all pretty successful at it, and hopefully they can teach you a few things about it. I'm going to try and pull up the URLs if I can do two things at once. But let me just give a real quick intro. You may know a lot of these people, or at least some of them. And the order is different than what I've got here, but well, Austin Elliott right here, who I've talked to and emailed stuff with, like a lot of things. I haven't met these people before, but I have interacted with them. He has the Trembling Earth blog, and he'll tell you more about that, and hopefully I can pull it up. And I'm going to have everybody introduce themselves as well. Next to him is Chris Rowan, totally famous, from the Highly Allochthonous. He's had a blog. He's been doing it for quite a few years, but I'll have him go into it. I'm not going to belabor this stuff. I'll let them introduce themselves more. Jessica Ball, whose blog Magma Cum Laude. Notice there's a Magma Cum Laude. Her blog actually lives on the AGU blogosphere, so she's one of the AGU bloggers. Now maybe I should pronounce the next name. I don't know how to pronounce it. Remy Basu. Yeah. Okay, and he has a. I'm going to let him explain his blog. It's an entirely different sort of animal than what the others have, but might be of interest to many of you who are interested in things like citizen science in your work. And last but not least, make sure I remember everybody. Eric Lindstrom, who's been field blogging for NASA. Let me start. I'll start with Eric on that end, and let me try and you can start. Just to tell them what you do and how long you've been doing it. Give them an intro. I'll try and get your blog up for you so people can see it.
Okay. So I'm Eric Lindstrom, and I guess I'm not a practicing scientist anymore. I'm a program manager at NASA headquarters in Washington, but I used to be a scientist. And a seagoing scientist studying global ocean circulation. And so 15 years ago, I got beamed up to work at NASA. And I've been wanting to get back to sea ever since. So we launched the Aquarius satellite last year, and I decided that since we're measuring salinity in the ocean from space, that we would have some seagoing process studies to go along with it, and that I was going to be part of it to make sure that our money was being well spent. And so I volunteered to join our expedition for 6 weeks at sea on the research vessel Nor as blogger-in-chief. And so not only did I get to oversee all the projects that I funded on the expedition, but also to write about them. And this was my first venture into the blogosphere, and I loved it. It was a lot of fun. And so photographs, a blog every day, and sharing the science that I've spent my lifetime learning. And so that was good. I think, do you want introduction? You want a few lessons learned right now?
We'll get into that. We'll get into that just a second. Okay. So just next here, Remy, please.
Okay, so we operate, so I'm from the Euromed Seismological Center, and we operate the second global earthquake information website in the world. And we try to turn to eyewitnesses to collect in situ information about the earthquake impact. So basically we collect geolocated pictures, macroseismic questionnaires in 32 languages, etc. So basically we went on Twitter, Facebook, Google+, etc. as a way to initially as a way to interact with eyewitnesses, because many people have different uses of the internet. So some of the people only know the internet through Facebook, for example. So if you're not present on this type of platform, then you're not identified. And I can give you an example. Just a few days ago, there was a failed earthquake in Algeria. There was very few people coming directly from the web, basically, but we get something like 10,000 visitors 20 minutes later just because of Facebook, because we are present on Facebook. So we basically initiated our presence on this Facebook, Twitter, etc., to try to optimize the data collections, but at the same time we realized that it changed the way we interact with the public, because you also have to understand their needs and you also have to offer them something. So, and I think that's what is interesting in this, is that you really have to start to better explain what you do, why do you do this, and to better interact with them. And so without going too much in details, I think that's really the stuff which is very interesting for us.
Okay, my name is Jessica Ball. I'm a PhD student currently at the University of Buffalo, and I'm working on volcanology. But before I became a student at Buffalo, I was blogging, and I actually started while I was working at the American Geosciences Institute on a whim, because I was looking at graduate schools and thinking, I don't know what it's like to be a geology graduate student, and there are no people I can talk to at my job or from, at the moment from my home institution to find this out. And so I thought, well, there are a lot of blogs out there from medical students or bioscience people about what it's like to be in graduate school. Why don't I start one about what it's like to be in geology graduate school? So I started magna cum laude independently, picking a lovely geology pun for the title because I could.
And it's traditional.
And it's traditional, right. You'll notice if you start looking through the geoblogs, there are quite a few with very funny titles. And 2 years after that, so that was in late 2007, I think. A couple of years after that, AGU approached me to be part of their blogosphere, and there are a number of really excellent bloggers on there. I usually end up talking a little bit about volcanology, a bit about grad school, a bit about science communication, and then because I live in Buffalo now, I talk about the geology of the area I live in. And that's about it for my intro.
Okay, I'm Chris Rowan. I blog at a blog called Highly Eloquenous, which is another semi-pun, but is also probably not the most pronounceable of titles, or spellable, in fact. So I've actually been blogging for rather longer than I probably want to admit. I actually started in mid-2006, just when I finished my PhD. And one motivation was I noticed science blogs, and a lot of them were on biology. There were some on physics and space science, and there wasn't really very many which were doing anything on earth science, and I thought this was not a very good situation, and I grumbled about it for a while, and then I thought, well, why don't I do something about it? So I started the blog. Nowadays, I also have picked up a co-blogger, so I blog on things like paleomagnetism, which is one of my research interests, and tectonics and earthquakes. My co-blogger, Anne Jefferson, sort of covers, she's a hydrologist, so she covers water, flooding, storms, and things like that. So we cover a fairly broad base in general. And it's been interesting because as I've been blogging, we've seen a huge growth in the number of people who actually have taken up the challenge of communicating geology to public through blogs. So one of the other things I do is I maintain an aggregator feed at allgeo.org, which basically sort of tries to bring together all of the geology blogs wherever they are and sort of just highlight the latest posts. So it's a way of sort of making sure that everyone gets some attention. And the other thing which I run together with my co-blogger is a kind of guest blog which is called Earth Science Erratics, yes, another pun, which is kind of aimed at people who are maybe interested in blogging, not sure they really want to commit to sort of setting up their own website and posting regularly, so, but it just gives them a chance to maybe sort of write a post about something that interests them, and it gives them a place where they're maybe a bit more visible right away. And we've already had one graduate of this who also blogs on our domain as well. I just mentioned that. So if you do decide after this session that you want to set up a blog, then please let me know so I can add you to our feed, and that means you'll get pushed out on Twitter and Facebook and on the internet in general, so you actually get people reading. Or if you just fancy, if there's one burning issue like you really think you need to give your opinion on, then also let us know and we can host you on our guest blog.
And I'm Austin Elliott. I'm a PhD student at the University of California, Davis, just up the road. And I study neotectonics, active faulting, and earthquakes. And really, earthquake phenomena are sort of my thing. I just can't get enough of understanding them, seeing them, understanding the way they impact people and the way people respond. I started my blog, The Trembling Earth, which is basically, well, I'll describe it in a second, but I started it a year and a half ago, just before the Tohoku earthquake, coincidentally. And it was sort of, the reason I started it was I think my friends and family tired of me bombarding them with earthquake videos and media. So I decided to make it a more passive experience for my audience, so people could sort of come to me if they wanted it. So I started this, and my general aim is to collect videos, media, animations, these things that make earthquake science really accessible, and I mean exciting for scientists to see, you know, things that visualize things interestingly or just topical information. So it's a lot of YouTube videos, but generally they're sort of, you know, I consolidate them and try to explain what you're actually seeing, you know, to make meaning out of these things that sort of can go viral or be sensationalized. And so I like being able to sit there and really communicate that there really is science behind this, and it sort of empowers people to think of earthquakes as not these terrorizing things, but features that they really understand and are pretty cool. And I've really enjoyed doing the blog, and, you know, following lots of blogs. There's so much rich information out there, and it's really nice to have it sort of distilled by the scientists themselves, trying to make it into publicly accessible things. One of the striking things about blogs is that you probably have more readership on a blog than any scientific paper you publish.
More feedback too.
Well, I have a few things here. Hopefully, are questions that you guys have. If not, we're going to be pretty informal. I mean, we're going to, after I ask a few things and they'll respond, then just start raising your hand and we'll start doing it with questions. Some of you already answered this, but so I'll just leave it open to whoever wants to say it. Some of you already said why you started blogging, but for those who didn't, please tell us why you even started, because it's sort of a daunting thing to start.
Because it was there. I really had a passion for non-technical writing. I think I became a program manager because I didn't like the technical writing part of science, but I loved science and I loved expeditioning, and so it was just a release of this passion about the ocean and so on, and I just saw a role to do it. So I couldn't be happier with having set out on and tried that, and I learned a lot from my editors about how to blog.
I think that along the way what I've learned is that there is a lot of demand from the public, and I think we have not, at least seismologists, I will not speak for all the sciences, we have not been very good in explaining to the public what they want to know. Basically, we started very specific top aims at collecting more information. But if you want to collect information, you have to engage with the people, and then you have to provide them something. And then, so for example, we make from time to time on Twitter, for 1 hour we answer any questions. We call this "Let's Talk About Quakes." So we ask we answer any questions of the people, of the public, and you realize first that people need clear answers, and I think that we are not always very good in providing clear and good messages for the people who felt an earthquake, what they should do, etc. And I think that's what we learned, at least, is that we have to improve our communication. So I think it's a very win-win strategy. I don't like this terminology normally, but I think it is actually the case. I think we better understand the needs of the people, and if you don't feel these needs, then we don't collect information. So we really try to improve our communication with the people, and we try to, for example, we are currently planning a totally new website because we are just realizing that the earthquake information websites, the traditional way they are done, does not answer the needs of the people. Just very simple example, if you look at the vast majority of the websites, when they provide earthquake information, they put the latitude and longitudes. Nobody knows what latitude and longitude is. People, when you talk in the normal life, people say, well, I live in this city or 10 kilometers from this city. We don't use latitude and longitudes, and I can challenge even many scientists who knows what is their latitude and longitude of their home. So I think that's what we learn, and what I really do appreciate is that suddenly we realize that we have to think the way we communicate with the people, and I think it's quite a good experience. At least that's something what I do like in this experience.
Another question I know this has got to be on people's minds, and I'm curious how you guys do it. Now, Remy, it sounds like yours is integral to what you're doing in terms of research, but for the other guys, or maybe as well for you, but how do you balance it with all the other duties you got? Because I know you guys got a lot of different things to do, and I know you may not have support from everybody at your institutions. If you could get into that.
I can start. Okay, so as a student things have to come first, always for me. Blogging is certainly enjoyable, but I do have to relegate it to free time, or at least time when I'm not absolutely committed to doing something else. I do have the advantage that my professors, my advisor in particular, are very enthusiastic about the fact that I blog, and they support it quite a bit. Which is nice because I don't have to sneak around and hide the fact that I'm writing about things in my off time instead of reading more papers or doing more analyses or something like that. So that's really helpful for me as a student. And if you can get the support of your peers and your advisors and everybody else around you, that's very helpful, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think as blogging has become more visible, you do get a lot more, if not open support, but not sort of criticism from your departments, because they can see the value in it. And I think actually the AGU having a blog network has certainly helped in this regard, because it gives a kind of professional stamp of approval. If like your professional society basically says, we think this is good enough that we want in. But yeah, I mean, basically, blogging is a hobby, so some people sort of paint their boats at the weekend, or sort of go and play football or whatever, and I write about science on the internet. And I think it's perfectly acceptable to have some downtime where you do sort of technically non-work related stuff. That said, there is some overlap with what I do. So some of the stuff I write about is if I'm doing some general thinking about a concept which I have to teach about, or I'm researching, and actually sitting down and writing down the basic concepts which I'm exploring helps with my understanding. So I do get a professional benefit from some of the writing I do as well. And it forces you to kind of keep your interests a bit broader than maybe you get pushed into sometimes, like especially if you're at the PhD or postdoc stage or working on one project, and you can get very sort of blinkered about your field, and you lose sight of sort of all the stuff which you should stay interested in if you're going to maintain a career in science. So, I mean, there are some professional sort of benefits to sort of doing this, even if you have to be careful not to let it take over.
Yeah, well, and I think you touched on the personal professional benefits, that it helps you develop your own knowledge of things. You really, if there's something that piques your interest, you can investigate it, and the blog gives you an outlet to kind of explain it to people and to make sure And because it is your professional career, it's in your own field, you are accountable to say the right things, you know, and so it's a good test to kind of keep you on your toes. And I think Remy kind of touched on this with, you know, what they're doing with Twitter and earthquakes and looking at what information people are actually looking for. It isn't just, you know, your personal sort of professional balance that you're striking. It really is, I think, important as scientists to communicate with the public and to make sure that they understand what we're doing and accurately understand results. You know, sometimes, and this isn't to disparage any science writers as far as people who do press, but people get a lot of information through press releases about science, and it's sort of a third party kind of synthesizing things, and sometimes it's helpful to have the real science, the real scientists explaining it in their own words as well as they can.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, what my conception of blogging is, it's not a replacement for, say, the media, but it's kind of an intermediary. So, you know, you have the public, and the media kind of communicates at their level, and you have scientists, and they sort of talk in very technical terms, and it's very hard to bridge the gap. Even if a layperson is interested in a particular concept, like, they really have to kind of teach themselves like a lot of technical stuff before they can really understand the scientific literature. And what blogs can do is actually provide that bridge by sort of slightly going into depth on some of these technical things, explaining it in more sort of accessible terms. And that gives people the opportunity to say, oh, okay, I understand what they mean by this bizarre acronym, which appears in all the papers now. So it serves an important role, which is separate and complementary to the traditional media, I think.
I guess I'm on the other end of the career path here, maybe headed towards retirement in, you know, less than 10 years. And so I see this as a new venture for my next career, you know, that I can gradually work my way out of doing all this program management, and that I, you know, maybe I can become a cruise ship scientist or something, you know, later on. So it's developing a new set of skills that may serve me better at the end of my career, because I can use all the experience and knowledge that I have and communicate it, and it feels good, and so it seems to work for me.
I only have one other question. This should be a fun one, I hope. If you have any anecdotes about either things that really helped you professionally because of your blogs, or got you into trouble, cautionary tales, that might be useful for people here.
I certainly had a pet peeve as a beginning blogger and going on an expedition that I got on this ship, and it seemed like somebody had been trying to send a blogger on every expedition, and they had a really bad name, bloggers, because people would go without any experience or knowledge. They didn't do their homework. They were just bloggers. They sort of like came along and tried to gather up information and say things, and the idea that somebody with vast technical knowledge and a background was blogging was like a totally new concept, and so they appreciated it better. But I had a big negative thing to overcome, that bloggers were these 20-somethings who didn't know anything, who came on board the ship and got in the way.
I have a positive experience on this. Organization is a small NGO, and you may remember there was some damaging earthquakes last May in Italy, and our servers were unable to cope with the number of visitors we had. So for several days, our website was very difficult to access because we didn't have enough server capacity. So we are maintaining the communication on the internet through Facebook, Twitter, and etc., so which prove also extremely useful, because you don't disappear, you're still around. And basically, the people who follow us resend messages for increased donation to organizations. So when our website went back, we had an increase in the donation from the public to help us buying new servers.
Well, on the positive side, I would say that blogging gets you noticed. And it's especially good for students because you end up getting people asking you to do a lot of things that will eventually, I hope, be good for your career. Although it does occasionally end up booking you solid for the first 3 days of AGU with meetings and speeches and panels that you end up going to. One kind of interesting anecdote that came out of blogging and some articles I had written for a website about volcanoes was that one of the professors in my department teaches intro geology and had assigned her students a writing project about volcanoes. And she came to me a little while afterwards and said, "I'm seeing all these citations with your name on it." They had all pulled up the articles that I had written for a geology.com website, and I was actually glad they were citing it in the first place, but she was very happy that they were getting them from what she considered a reputable source. So hopefully I contributed something useful to the knowledge of volcanology in my department.
Well, I have a positive, which isn't exactly about me, but it is about my co-blogger, who is an assistant professor, and she has actually had students contact her interested in doing master's degrees and things with her and research with her based on the fact that they found her through her blog. So it kind of, I think when you're a student, if you see you're a potential sort of professor sort of active and obviously engaged in this sort of thing, it means that they kind of know what you're about and sort of creates a good impression, it seems. So I'm hopeful that I can hopefully get some recruitment going that way myself when I have a faculty job.
Yeah, I'll just say that the the internet is a strange and dangerous place, and you get a real mix of these great positive experiences. For example, just some subtle, one of my most enjoyable experiences writing my own blog is being able to sort of track what's getting people there, what search terms they're using to arrive there. And I think this gets to kind of what Remy does, that you're seeing what the public wants and you're able to respond to it. In this particular example, back in November, there was a series of earthquakes in Oklahoma, and my blog all of a sudden just got this enormous number. I made a post about it, just basic information. The blog got a huge number of hits, and I could see that everyone was searching. They'd heard this news report that the earthquakes happened on the Wilzetta Fault, and everyone was searching Wilzetta Fault. Where is the Wilzetta Fault? Wilzetta Fault, like city names and town names, and there were really no good maps showing this. This news article had mentioned it, and nothing else said it. And so, I felt like, okay, as someone who knows to go to state geological survey websites or knows how to get geologic maps, I can find this information and actually supply it to people. And it was really rewarding because I got to say, okay, clearly people want to know where this is. There's a niche, and I could sort of in real time, update next post, here's a map of where this is, so you all know, it runs under your house or whatever. On the flip side, so that, the internet invites this, people can easily ask questions and get answers, but it can also, there are a lot of crazy people on the internet. And people reblog and visit and put links up to your site, and sometimes I'll notice these big, especially because I'm posting videos largely of phenomena that happen during earthquakes and things like liquefaction, and sometimes the videos will get reposted by people who have all kinds of crazy conspiracy theories about the government and how, and you worry, like, I think you're all misinterpreting this, but it sort of, it forces you to step up your game a little bit and be like, okay, if I need to make sure that if the wrong people use this, that at least the information is objective and straightforward. There's only so far they can go, and it's in their hands. It's the, sort of. They're good and bad experiences. It's just based on how people use the internet, I think, and access your stuff.
Well, thanks. And I should say, I blog. I do it as a science writer, and I can concur with you on a lot of things. Just in terms of the bad stuff, especially when you get into things like climate change and stuff. It always brings out the crazies, and you just have to learn. Actually, I found the most effective approach was just to say, wow, you solved it all in just a minute, thanks, now leave me alone. I didn't know what to say after that. But I wanted to, if anybody has any questions at this point, please raise your hand and we'll have them try and answer them for you. No questions? Come on. Others.
Beyond the simple, I shouldn't say simple, but beyond the type of blog that we saw and looking at each of your examples, talk a little bit about how you integrate the full kind of spectrum of social media, things like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Google+, these kind of things that can be both force multipliers but also be really distracting and kind of be good to learn if any of you have even put together kind of a matrix that shows how these things integrate and how kind of you can build an economy of scale of using one particular site as something that could populate a number of sites.
Social media is a big change in blogging over the last few years because, as you say, it's a really effective way of driving traffic if you can get the right people retweeting your links. Some of these things are easier to integrate than others. For example, Twitter, you can actually set it so when you post something, like it will auto post like the title and the link onto Twitter for you, so you don't even have to sort of post it yourself. Facebook, there's a plugin which does a similar thing. So if you post something, it will automatically post that onto your homepage, or you can set up a separate page for your blog if you like. Google Plus is as far as I know, you basically have to physically go and say, hey, I've written this cool post, go and read it. So it's kind of worth the effort, although I have found that a lot of these things, if all you do is post links to your blog post, then it doesn't really do very much. So you kind of really have to be active on Twitter, say, anyway, and sort of you're tweeting links about geology or whatever you're interested in. And then as part of that mix, you say, and here's something really cool I've written. That tends to be more effective than if you're just sort of plugging your blog posts all the time. It can work, but because if you're actually actively sort of have a presence on Twitter, that means you're followed by people who sort of realize you're tweeting interesting things, so they're more likely to pick it up and retweet it. And it's basically when you can sort of spread it through your network rather than you doing it yourself a lot of the time, which is when the social media feedback starts to work to your advantage. So.
I guess I took a different approach, which is I don't know anything about Facebook and Twitter. I'm old-fashioned. I just wanted to blog, but I knew that if I blogged for NASA, they have a big following, and it was just like going big wave surfing, you know. You just get your board and go, and it was sort of all supplied. So the parent body that you're working for can be your agent. You don't have to work it all yourself.
Yeah, it really does. That does depend on where your blog lives. I mean, I know, like Jessica, you promote your own blogs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but then on top of that, because she's in the AGU blogosphere, I also promote them too through AGU's Twitter account and Facebook, and sometimes even elsewhere. So it does help. Sometimes your affiliation. Yeah.
And with Twitter and the blogs, I think it works really well both ways. You know, Twitter's a great way to quickly advertise to people about different blogs, interesting things you see. But you know, Chris does this very effectively, and a number of other blogs do sort of weekly Twitter dispatches where you just take, and it's just your weekend reading list, basically. You know, these are all the interesting things that came up that you posted on Twitter this week, but they're all in one place. And so the blog, basically, you know, a lot of other scientists don't have time to follow Twitter and click on links all day long to interesting things, and even you don't sometimes, right? Or you know, so it's good to save up that information, have it consolidated, and the blog post is a really good way to sort of feed that out to people and say, here's a ton of interesting stuff, have at it. You know?
Yeah, there's a few people who do that. You do that. There's a few other blogs that do that where they just compile stuff, which is, you know, some people hate it, some people love it. You know, it just depends. It's an awful lot. It's a fire hose. Yeah.
Well, you have to be a bit careful. I mean, when I do it, I kind of filter out stuff which has become irrelevant or is, you know, this is very funny, but it has no long-term interest. But interestingly, I have sought feedback on occasion on these things just to check that, you know, it's not just annoying people. And it's overwhelmingly people say, yeah, we like this. And it could just be the people who don't like it, sort of just ignore it. But every reaction I've ever had about it has basically been, yes, we like this, keep on doing it. So
Yeah, that's one of the beauties of, so when you get a network going and get enough people following things, and it's often overlooked, is you can always ask them. It's very simple. If you're wondering why something happened or why you got a certain response, you can just ask, and it's surprising you can usually get an answer. Other questions? How many people here are actually seriously considering starting a blog? I see a few hands kind of timidly. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of details. I mean, I think all these people could help give you more details about some of the ins and outs of it. Chris in particular seems to be particularly equipped for helping the beginners on it. I think among if I could summarize a few things, I think the most important thing that probably all of these people have in common is that they kind of started with a passion for wanting to communicate the work that they're doing. I think you kind of have to have that. That seems to be, would you guys agree that you all kind of...
I actually have a good quote on that from the blogosphere, a guy named Kevin Anderson. He said, "The bottom line is that blogging is like sex. You can't fake it. You can't fake passion. You can't fake wanting to engage with the public. If you do, it will ultimately be an unsatisfying experience for both the blogger and their readers." But
well,
passion is the key. I think passion is definitely the key.
Yeah.
And you're better able to express that if you have the technical background. You know, I think everybody here has some technical foundation on which they stand on, then they feel passionate about communicating that. And people can detect the passion right away in your writing.
Yeah, passion is important. Perseverance as well, because it can take a while to really get into it. It's a bit easier nowadays because you do have the social network. So there's a very vibrant and supportive community of geologists who are active on Twitter. So if you sort of contact them and say, hey, I've started a blog, could you spread the word? Like, we'd be perfectly happy to do so, because we're always happy to sort of see new people sort of adding their voices. The more the merrier, as far as we're concerned. So
Yeah, there's a huge number right now. I kind of lost track of all the earth science related blogs. Have any idea how many there might be?
Well, I track on my aggregator like something like 300, and I'm sure there's a lot I'm missing, because I basically just add them when I come across them or someone lets me know about it. But like every week, I generally think, oh yes, I haven't got that one, have I? I should add that. So.
And there's different classes of bloggers, of course. There are bloggers out there who are paid to blog, who've developed it as a business, really. Phil Plait, the bad astronomer, would be a great example. Very successful blogger, really good blogger. But he interacts with everybody else too. It's not like he's above anybody. He's extremely really part of the science blogging community. So it is a great community of people out there that you're getting into when you do it, including all these people. Any other questions?
I have a very basic question. So I think I'm like a boundary at the age of people who have no idea what the blog is, and somebody who really familiar with technology. Like honestly, I don't really know what the blog. Like, how do you start a blog? Like, really basic question. Do you have to have a good programming skills to do it? And the second question will be like, how often do you post things to keep people engaged? Because I know once you kind of keep quiet for a week, you can lose your whole audience. So what are your rate with which you post new things?
Well, on the technical side, it's extremely easy, especially nowadays. There's Blogger and WordPress, and basically you just go to their site, sign up for an account, and click New Post, and you can start. And you can get involved in the technicalities of changing the appearance of your blog, and if you really want to, you can sort of host your own. But basically, the sort of big hosted sites nowadays are very, very easy to use. So you know, if you can use Word, then you can use like blogging software.
And for your second question, I find that if I try and do at least a post a week, even if it's not a substantial post, and oftentimes if I'm deep into research, I don't have time to sit down and write out a really long one. But it keeps momentum going. It gives you incentive to keep going because sometimes it's very easy to just stop posting and then 3 or 4 months later you realize I haven't looked at this in a long time. I can't let myself do that because that would be embarrassing for me since AGU has given me their support. I don't want to disappoint them. But you know, a lot of it depends on your ability. And there are blogs out there that post maybe, you know, once or twice a month, but they do long posts and they're very involved and they still have a pretty big following. So it depends on a lot of it what you want to write about as well.
I think consistency is the key. So, you know, if you're posting once a week and then you don't post for 2 months, then people might say, oh well, maybe they've given up. But if you like post twice a month and you know you just wait a month, then people are more likely to sort of say, oh well, you know, they're probably not. So set a pace which you're comfortable maintaining. I think, like, sort of, I mean, I tried once, like, posting once a day, I think, and basically I burnt out within like 2 weeks. It's just I just can't do it because I like writing longer posts. So just find a style that suits you and something which you can maintain and still sort of, you know, keep track of the things like research and teaching. Well, and
you share your blog now, though. You also you
yeah,
two people.
And
that's my point. Yeah.
That can help. That can help.
I think that there's another way of going about it, which is make it a team sport. So at NASA we have expedition bloggers. And the blog is from the field, and so when you're out in the field, you're blogging, and when you're not, you're not. But there's always somebody out in the field, and so they can keep the thread going, but everybody's winking in and out. You know, you might think of what it is that you want to post, and maybe there's some other people who you could weave together something with, and take a little bit of the daily pressure, weekly pressure off. I think that that's probably helps me a lot, is that I can go back to the audience because the other people on the NASA team have been keeping that same audience entertained.
Yeah, and if you don't have a whole team of people to do it, another strategy you can employ is to sort of, you know, it is pretty important to stay consistent, and you know, you keep your viewership up, you keep people happy if you're regularly posting and feeding information. But sometimes you just don't have time for it, or you sort of, you're busy some weeks and not others, and it can be helpful to just have most of these services, all the services I think, allow you to basically back up blogs, sort of, so you have some in the pipeline. You know, you can save drafts, you just sort of spend a weekend just writing on all these exciting things, and you can say, okay, I'm going to be busy for the next 3 weeks, but I'm going to have it just automatically post these at sort of regular intervals, and it sort of does the work for you, and you can, you know, so you can go in these different bursts. I tend to do that a lot. I end up getting really invested in certain topics that I'm just not, once I start writing about it, I realize I just want to draw in more and more information so I can give a really sort of robust, complete report about it. And I realize it's going to take me way longer than I want, so I'm like, okay, well, maybe I'll find something that's a little more simple that I can just send out this week. And, you know, this one's going to be a longer term project that'll be, you know, I can update that over time.
There's another strategy too, and that is, you guys like to write, but blogs aren't just about a lot of prose. Sometimes you can, I mean, you use a lot of videos. I mean, there's multimedia. I mean, there's all kinds of other things. Sometimes you can actually write less, and it's just putting context around a very interesting image of some kind. So that those can be a lot easier sometimes if you have the imagery. It doesn't take as much time to put it together. So there are a lot of different strategies because there's a lot of different content you can be focusing on as well.
Hi, I'm wondering if you can talk about how you found your voice as bloggers, because as a scientist, I know how to write for peer-reviewed journals, and that's a really boring form of writing. So how did you, what are the differences in your writing styles, and how did you come to find those?
I know I discovered long before I was a blogger that I was not a technical writer. I went to MIT and got steeped in math and physics, but every semester I took an art history course, and I wrote and wrote and wrote on art and art history. And all of my technical work following my undergraduate days was characterized as too flowery or too emotional or too many adjectives. And so I'm really frustrated with that, and now I've found the outlet. The voice for blogging is much better. I mean, this is I think the combination of technical stuff and a penchant for writing with a little bit more flower is what is needed.
I think the simple answer is just write. The more you write, the better, the easier it is to find your voice. And yeah, I mean, sometimes making the transition from technical, peer-reviewed paper prose to blogging is just simply a matter of writing something as simple as you can, then reading it again and noticing all the technical words which are still in there and taking them out. But practice, just write, and you will find your voice.
I think the approach that I originally took sort of builds off of outreach that I've done. So my mother likes to invite me to come to her elementary school and talk to the 5th graders about volcanoes. And I found that dumbing it down is a very bad strategy for 5th graders because they ask really intelligent questions about things. And so I found myself learning to think on the fly and learning to translate science, but not to dumb it down. So when I write a blog post, I sort of imagine that I'm writing to explain it to maybe my friends who are not geologists, or my family, or the 5th graders at my old elementary school. Depending on what I'm writing about, I tend to adjust the technicality of it. The nice thing about blogging is that even if you take out a lot of the technicality initially, you can provide links, or you can provide references, or things that people can then go to explore deeper into the science. So you don't necessarily have to present it all at once, but you can let them build on it as they want to. And that's where a lot of the comments come in, because people will often ask you to explain something in more detail.
Yeah, I actually find it, I find it very natural, and I sort of approach, I think in particular, the media of a blog, or the medium of a blog is, it's like you're just writing, like you're explaining what you do to your family or friends, and it takes that natural voice that it starts out, if you were just talking, it would be fairly simplistic, but because you're writing it down, and because you can provide links, provide pictures, provide graphics, it really helps illustrate things, and so you can add this dimension of information to it that kind of bridges that gap between the really simplistic, dumbed down, accessible, we might call it, versus the technical stuff. And it's sort of a choose your own journey. You know, the readers can decide, if you're very explicit about what you're linking them to, what you're showing, what you're offering, they can choose how much detail they want to go into.
And blogs often have comments. I mean, you don't have to turn them on, but that's one way where you can get feedback. Like, so you write something and someone goes, well, I was interested in that, but I didn't understand this bit. And that sort of gives you some insight into where you've done well at explaining something, and where sort of there's still some assumed knowledge which you've assumed they have and they don't. And then you can correct that. Yeah,
that's exactly what I was going to say. You do get feedback. If you get nothing, you don't really know, but you generally get feedback. You know, I blog for Discovery News, and my lesson in blogging, I didn't want to blog when it was years ago when they started blogging, and my lesson was, they gave it to me to blog, write this blog on earth science stuff, and I was just like, it's like a dog that needed to be fed all the time. It was bugging me. I didn't even know what I was doing. I had no idea what blogging was about. So I thought, you know, I'm just gonna get really opinionated, and they'll just kick me off the blog. And of course, what happened?
You got it right.
Right, all of a sudden it was more popular. I got more traffic because I was opinionated, so it was like, dang it, you know, just exactly what I should have done. But that's kind of that was the key. You know, suddenly my voice came out because I had an attitude all of a sudden. So yeah,
So I wanted to just sort of pile on to Jessica's comment about not dumbing things down. As a scientific society here, the AGU, as scientists who are interested in blogging, you know, we should not go down that road of dumbing anything down. What our challenge is to take all that beautiful technical content and translate it out to the public and to get them smarter. And so we need to package it so they'll consume it in a way that they get the fullness of the detail and the facts the way it should be. And we'd be proud of what's been communicated.
And I think that's where the real satisfaction comes in. You know, it's when you feel you've explained something really well and you get feedback, like a teacher sort of emails you and says, wow, I really enjoyed that post, I've used it to explain this to my class, and they all got it, and it's great. And that's where you get the real sort of buzz out of doing this, because you can say, yes, I've made a difference. Like, more people in the world understand this thing than they did before I wrote it. So,
any other questions? I know we had a couple more people. Way in the back.
Hi, this question is for Eric, but I open up to the rest of the panel. I currently work for a federal organization, and we have many rules about social media. And in terms of opinions versus facts and how you give that information out, could you talk a little bit about that?
Wow, that's a difficult question. I feel kind of like expedition blogging is the wild, wild west. That I'm out in the middle of the ocean blogging, and do they really know I'm from the federal government? Nobody. I never heard from the information police on that matter, and I don't think that I've ever felt like I was violating any public trust at all. Is that all I'm trying to do is get across scientific information to a wider audience. I'm not about having an opinion about anything other than getting the facts across. So I think the delicateness comes probably in answering comments and questions that come in on the blog, not the blog itself. And but I don't think I engendered too many questions that got into climate change or, all the controversial questions seem to be blown down by people flaming back, that any uncomfortableness was taken care of by the blogosphere itself. They would come to my defense, and I used some big word, and somebody would say, you shouldn't use that big word, and then somebody else would come in and say, hey, let the educated guy have his voice, and it sort of goes on and on. But I don't feel like that that should be an impediment, that you're a federal employee. You're allowed to have a voice, too.
It touches on an issue that goes beyond just federal government policies, and it really is sort of the ethics of a science community. And obviously you're publishing academic, professional, and scientific things in a non-peer-reviewed format, right? And although they may not be hugely globally controversial issues, you may be espousing or talking about certain issues that are still up for debate, may be the wrong word, but there isn't an answer to yet. I mean, it's science. It takes a long time for everyone to come to consensus about things, and so it can be a dangerous road, and I find it a really helpful challenge to sort of make sure that I'm giving complete information, right? I'm not just saying something because I read it and it was interesting. Writing the blog, I think, lends me this, I feel this responsibility to give fair information so that my scientific peers don't come to me and say, what in the world were you talking about? That's wrong and crazy, So I learn a lot more because I go out, and it actually, it helps make me do this kind of research and making sure I'm being as objective as possible, presenting information publicly.
I guess it's been kind of addressed slightly already, but in terms of the comments you get, I wanted to ask if you get many sort of hostile comments from people that have a lot of problems with you write. Just a bit of background, I write a blog on shale gas, which is obviously a particularly polarizing and heated thing, and obviously you try and sort of respond to any hostile comments in a professional and mature way, but I find it very difficult not to descend into what is essentially a slanging match. I was really any views on how to deal with that. Let's say, I mean, Larry talked about just ignore them, but as I say,
well, yeah, it depends very heavily on what you decide to write about. I actively avoid controversial topics like climate change or evolution or something like that because I simply don't have time to deal with it, and I choose not to write about them. But I did write one post about, I think it was gas seeps in Western New York, which attracted quite a bit of attention from people, you know, who are talking about hydrofracturing, which is a very contentious issue in my area. And I tend to find that if you respond politely once and make your point, and then you can stop. And that is adequate. You don't have an obligation to engage with the crazy people.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it seems that people just have this permanent Google search looking for particular key phrases, and as soon as you include it in a blog post, they descend and sort of post their screed, which is longer than your actual post in the comments. I guess the thing is, like, comments, there are tools where you can sort of, so you can basically set it so that comments do not appear before you've sort of looked at them and said okay, and you should feel perfectly justified in not letting anything go on there which you're not comfortable with being there. You'll get claims of censorship, but it's your blog, so, you know, if you look around, you find that people who do sort of set a strong hand on their moderation, even if they're discussing controversial topics, then the comments do tend to become a bit more civilized because people learn that, you know, if they go too off track, then they're just not going to appear. But, you know, I mean, you can pick up these random things. Like if you blog about earthquakes, I don't know whether you've got any of this yet, but there's these people who are obsessed with this HAARP station up in Alaska or something, and sort of it basically triggers earthquakes everywhere where you'd expect them to occur anyway. But, you know, it's all the U.S. government conspiracy to invade Haiti or whatever. So you can sometimes be surprised at exactly sort of what you can sort of uncover when you sort of, but you just have to sort of just say, you know, you have your opinion, but that's nothing to do with what I'm writing about, so, you know, whatever.
My experience is that there are two types of people. There are the crazy people, and in this case, there is no point to engage. Like the HAARP weapon is a traditional one, and basically it's just crazy, and it is quite famous. I didn't know it, so I had to browse the web to understand what it was about, and it's just crazy.
It was eye-opening, yeah.
So that's, but really, we had, in one case, during 1 minute on our website, there was a false location, and it was in Libya, and it was during the war. And suddenly one guy take a picture and he says, oh, they're hiding a nuclear test of the US. It's always the US, sorry for you. That's, it was a US nuclear test in Libya and they're hiding it, etc., etc. So there is no way to discuss with this because you will never get through. At the same time, I realized once that there was a lot of people coming from a blog, and the people basically didn't understand the updates of the location. So basically we try to provide rapid earthquake information, and of course you have updates of the location and magnitude. And the people were, just because they didn't know, they were just creating theory that we're hiding stuff, etc. And I just register on their blog and just say, well, you know, I'm in charge of this website and I can explain what happened. And I say, you know, you can check the data available, they are there, and that's it. And suddenly everything stops. So I think you have to find the right way to interact with different type of people. If there is absolutely no hope, I think if you have time to waste, it's a good way. But that's
I think Remy's completely right, and that there are these people that you can't even engage with. It's not going to be productive for anyone, and it's irrationalness. And in some cases, it's best to just reject those comments and say it's your opinion is not worth being heard. But it also provides the blogs provide a really good venue for correcting people or linking people to the right information. So if there are people out there who are below that threshold of misguidedness, but are still confused about it or have a differing opinion, maybe their opinion is fair. I mean, you know, you can be objective and link to the right data and information.
Yeah, I discovered in this blogging that there are a lot of people out there that are really intelligent with crazy ideas, and that they weren't afraid of expressing them, but they needed some better facts and information. They just didn't maybe have enough education in a particular field, and so on. One that came to mind was maybe all of us scientists know about carbon dioxide in the atmosphere being a greenhouse gas. Well, these people said, well, it goes into the ocean. Is it a greenhouse gas in the ocean? Is it making the ocean warmer? And that's sort of like taking physics to a different media, and you know, it sounds like it might be reasonable, but it isn't. And so it was a great opportunity to go into that field, correct it, and you know, maybe educate somebody.
Go ahead, but then we're going to have to wrap
I think
it up.
I have one. We are talking about explaining with to families. My policy is I talk to my grandmother, basically, and I think it's very important because she had little scientific education, but still, it means these people have right questions, and you have to understand. I think, from my point of view at least, this is the best target. If you can explain, if you discuss with your grandparents, you are respectful, even if the questions seem stupid from time to time. That's just because of a lack of education. And I try to explain as much as I could with still empathy and still taking questions, because questions, if people dare to raise questions, for them it is appropriate questions and you have to answer them.
Okay, well, we're up against the hour here, so I don't want to keep anybody longer. I want to thank you guys for participating in this, and I hope you guys got something useful out of this whole thing. And you feel free to talk to folks, but we are up at 6 o'clock now, so we move on.
Ron Schott is on our chat, and he says to not forget that the social relationships you build as a blogger carry over to beer time at GeoBloggers get-togethers. He wishes he could be here tonight, but have a drink for him. Have a good evening.
I was just going to mention that there is a get-together of some of us GeoBloggers at 8:30 tonight at
Johnny Foley's, the
which
Irish
is on
bar.
O'Farrell Street, is it?
Yes.
Yeah. So if you want to come along, you're very welcome.
Thanks.